This program is designed to provide general information with regards to the subject matters covered. This information is given with the understanding that neither the hosts, guests, sponsors, or station are engaged in rendering any specific and personal, medical, financial, legal, counseling, professional service, or any advice. You should seek the services of competent professionals before applying or trying any suggested ideas.
Good morning, truth seekers and fellow true crime enthusiasts. Today we are back with Hit the Road, Jack. We are looking at the lipstick killing case and the possible cipher solves or communications that it is believed by some contain other messages. Today, as I promised, we're going to have Harriette Sucher today with us looking over these communications. I've put up this first slide here so that I can show you what she's going to be talking about. This is a set of code keys that was sent to a Detective Lynch, I believe in the Fairfield area, in regards to the Zodiac. But I just wanted to show these code keys before we jump into the ciphers. So without much ado, I would like to introduce Harriette Sucher, which is the person who's going to be speaking primarily on these cipher solves and how she got involved with this case. So here is Harriette. Good morning. How are you?
Doing fine.
Great.
I thought you were going to call me Cat's Eye there for a minute.
Well, I thought about it, but they wouldn't know who you were unless I started with Harriette first. So yes,
yeah,
Cat's Eye is
no problem. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
That's okay. Cat's Eye is how I was introduced to her on Dennis's message board, a forum that he had for the Zodiac killer, and that was her screen name. So I will probably inadvertently refer to you as Cat's Eye as we go throughout this.
You've done that before. You'll say Cat's Eye. You've done something like this similar. Come on, you know better. And then I'll say Sweet Cheeks.
No, that wasn't one I was looking to bring up. But yes, I did go incognito on Dennis's board when I first became involved. I wanted more information after looking at the handwriting, and I wanted to see what everybody had to say about Jack and his possibility. So I did. I went incognito, and I had a screen name, Sweet Cheeks. Well, we are back at the lipstick ransom note that was left on Susan Dagnan's bed. And this is where we're going to start with Cat's Eye in regards to some of the solves. Now, I am not a cipher person. I do not decode things, but everybody seems to have their favorite decoder when it comes to their favorite suspect. So my favorite decoder, obviously, at this point is Cat's Eye. Some of the reasons why I've actually put any weight into some of the solves is that she has actually been able to come up with solves that indicate the person who is next. That's been a big theme in the Zodiac case. Yes, that I've been trying to figure out how they knew who was next based on the communication. So Harriette, how did you get involved?
Yeah, it started out basically around 1995. Where in San Francisco, it was a big, huge story saying Zodiac's alive and he's in Boston because Zodiac was sending cryptic communications to the Gardner Museum. So I said to myself, I remember I saw something as a kid in 1970. So, and I saw a different person than other people thought it was. I saw a young man. Anyways, I started researching what I thought I remembered I saw, and I felt that I did really have some connection to the Zodiac ciphers, and so I started researching them a lot in mid-1990s. Then by 1998, I saw the show on the Zodiac Killer, which was America's Most Wanted with Tom Voigt as So I saw that show, and it was December 28th, 1998, and he was the webmaster for the hit ZodiacKiller.com. So I joined, I think it was January 1999, and I was very adept in understanding, and I was the cases, but I was hoping that I could crack them because I've been doing anagrams and word puzzles since I was 7 years old. So um, Dennis, a year later, Dennis joins as Kenny Kilgore, and he really had something. And every time he would say, "Come on, Tom, you know the FBI backs my stepfather, who's still alive, as it." And then he would put links to, even though he was anonymous, he would put links to the shows that were being done and newspaper articles on this latest development of the real Zodiac possibly discovered. And if you sided with Dennis Kaufman, Kenny Kilgore, you were kicked off the message board.
Do you find that a lot of people come in incognito in this case?
At first, yes, and you wonder who they are, but you know, but for Kenny Kilgore, he had something. I could feel, and so I would side with him, and we'd both be kicked off or beat up online for 3 or 4 days, and then be let back in. And
That's kind of
that
a
told
running
me,
that's kind of a running theme with Tom Voigt's board, isn't it? If you don't agree with him, then he kicks you
yes,
off.
yeah.
if
If you didn't
if you're
agree it was Arthur Lee Allen, you weren't really welcome there. And I said, it's
I
not Arthur Lee Allen.
I see that he has a lot of people up there as plausible suspects. I don't know if he wants to keep the pool that far open, but yes, I do find that if you don't agree with him, that you were a victim of what I would call his trolling. Not only would he
Oh,
kick you
yes.
off, yes, but he would contact you by email or bash you or speak badly to you, develop
Hmm.
websites about you. Like, yes, this man thinks he's got a ring on this, but I think the ring is just to keep everything in a circle so it can't be figured out.
Well, for me, that's why I would say about a year after being in Dennis Kaufman's The Real Zodiac Killer message board, I felt, they seem to know everything about me. I might as well just say my real name instead of Cat's Eye. And that gave support for Dennis. He felt really good about that because it seemed you, me, and anybody else who was real on Dennis's message board, which was few, um, made him feel like he had some real support and hope in closing. His main case was to identify who really, I mean, not identify, he knew his father killed, or stepfather killed his mom. But he wanted closure. And then he also found out many other people needed closure in trying to understand why their daughters, why their sons, what happened. So that's, what
Right.
I said. I'm just
So
going to
what
use my real name.
So when did you get involved with Dennis's message board?
I tried to get involved in November 2008. I started trying to join, and it took me 4 months. I was trying to join. I even contacted his then good friend, Tina Long, and I was exchanging emails with her so she could forward them to Dennis what I knew what was the truth and what wasn't, just to try to help support him. But finally, I got involved in April of 2009.
Took that long to get on his board.
Yeah, and Dennis quickly, he told me, he said just because some of the FBI agents he was working with was trying to screen out all these horrible trolls that were they were also trying to understand why is this happening to Dennis Kaufman.
Right.
So,
Right.
so then they cleared me, and then Dennis cleared me.
Perfect. So
Mhm.
basically, you've discovered what you believe is the key to many of these messages. At least it started with the Zodiac killer case,
Mhm.
where you started being able to cipher these messages based on Dennis's the way he did things, let's say. So what
Mhm.
were some of those ways that he ciphered messages?
Um, I noticed it was the common thread was anagramming. So even if you had just a simple sentence, sometimes it was just an anagram. But for me, how I discovered what the code keys, how they're going to work, was actually watching The Hunt for the Zodiac Killer, where they said they thought that the 340 was a chessboard cipher. So once I tried that, and I already knew the code keys, the code symbols, I did get a message when I put the Z340 on top of the Z408, where all the weird dots and blobs in that matched, and then it hit corresponding code keys or code symbols, and then I anagrammed it, and it basically came out something like, "I'm Jack T, ask JFK government." So I said, "Oh my, I hit something." So I was then finding that that was how I was going to find a message. Then I took the first page of one of
Let
the
me
yeah.
Can I interrupt real quick?
Sure.
I just want to bring people up to speed with this, because when you
Mhm.
bring in JFK involved with this case, it starts to sound a little ludicrous and it starts to sound a
Okay.
little crazy. But I want everybody to understand we're going to see a message in 1963 in
Mhm.
which the Zodiac did write a letter to the Dallas Police Department in
Mhm.
regards to the JFK crime. So there is some type of involvement or knowledge of or information that Jack actually had in order to be able to
Mhm.
write this message to them. So I just wanted everybody to think, or not to think, that just because
Yeah.
you brought up
I'm gonna
JFK that
yeah.
we were being crazy.
I was getting a
Okay,
little
so
forward there, but that's how I discovered how using a cipher and then the corresponding code keys and code symbols was going to work out. And so then it just snowballed from there. I was sending you things every day. I said, I
right,
think I
right.
got this, I got that. And I was, and you know, for me to, and I continue to this very day to crack his world open, it's like opening up a Christmas present.
Well,
So, because I never know what it's going to say.
and
Hmm?
interestingly enough, one of the ciphered codes that you came up with led us to a location where what the code or what the message said, we actually found, right? Like, we
Hmm.
went up to South Lake Tahoe to the destination, and
Hmm.
this was one of the solves that Lawrence Swearingham had also completed, though he came up with a different location. It is now being conceded that the location Lawrence Swearingham came up with, the cadaver dogs actually hit on
Hmm.
uh, dead bodies, but there was nothing there. So it was
Yeah,
presumed, and even by Lawrence Swearingham, that the body was there,
was
was
moved.
killed, was moved. Exactly.
Hmm.
So the location that we showed up to could be a possibility as to where it was moved to. Either way,
Hmm.
I did find that there was some credibility to the solves, obviously, because what you found and what you wrote down, we were able to track ourselves directly to. So that
Hmm.
brings us to me asking you to look at other communications, which is including the lipstick killing cases.
Yeah, I was surprised when I looked at. I'm going to pull it up on my phone. Well, you have it there. The When I looked at the ransom note, I tried it as an anagram and it just didn't work. And that was, I believe, the first time that I realized try it as Zodiac code symbols and code keys. And
And you
I
really
got,
think that he
yeah,
was using something like that as early as
oh,
the lipstick
definitely.
killing, 1718?
He's smart enough to.
Correct. No.
Yeah, no, I'm just saying because you've been asking me could he have done this at 13, 14, 15, and yeah, he I think he had I think it's similar for me. He had only one good eye, but he had the intelligence to know how to put these things together and send them out. And
Didn't
so,
Dennis
yeah,
talk about the use of highlights magazines? If everybody remembers
definitely.
the highlights magazines you'd see in the
Hmm.
doctor's office, the dentist office, something that was very well alive and well back in those days. We
Yeah.
see them less and less now, but it is still around.
Well, I used to, um, I think I told you, and I'll tell the audience, I'm dyslexic, and I didn't know that as a kid, and I don't think my parents even knew, but I kept on getting the same words misspelled. And so I learned to concentrate how to make sure in my mind's eye to switch letters around so I can come up with a correct word. So when it came to highlights and also doing the puzzles that were in the Examiner, because my family got the Examiner. I would do the word puzzles, and had no problem, and I would crank them out fast at 7, 8, 9 years old, 10 years old, and yeah, definitely the highlights magazines. I'd have my pencil, just work them out very quickly. So I didn't know until later on when I was trying to understand how can I do this? What gives me the gift of this ability? And I found out in the 1940s that especially in Britain, they found that some of the best code breakers were women because they can multitask, but also anagram because they were dyslexic.
Interesting.
Yeah, because they had to train the same thing, had to train since they were children how to switch the letters around so they wouldn't misspell things. So,
Gotcha. Well,
mhm,
that brings us to the message. Get $20,000 ready and wait for word. Do not notify the FBI
mhm,
or police. And that again, these are themes that run in the Zodiac as well, but
mhm.
bills and fives, and obviously the last part of that was cut off. So why don't we discuss what you found in regards to your code? I see that we have a bunch of letters up here, that you have numbers. How does all of this work?
Well, my system of anagramming goes back to since I can remember. I learned to do it in ink so I could concentrate better and number them. So if I see with my eyes, let's say like this one is 62 symbols, then I better have every number accounted for, and it helps me concentrate. So
I think the highest I see on here is 65, it looks like.
65. That's right, because I ended up. That's also why I numbered them because then I can rescan everything with my eyes, and if I see something left over, like what happened with two, TO, I said, oh, okay, I forgot to put that in because this was my fourth try. Because
So is this one just an anagram, or did you actually use the
it's
code
the
keys on
code
this?
key. It's the code symbols. It's I would say 95% of it are the code symbols with code corresponding code keys from Jack's future era. He was using it then. Um, and then there's a couple of I found and I remember because I had my notes somewhere that the F and the S that's disguised as a 5, that's where I got the extra S for Vegas because I was missing it when I was redoing this. So I said, that's right. The F and the S was disguised as a 5. And then what people think are like a clef looking symbol is actually a stylized cursive S. And I think Jack did something similar to that in his cursive handwriting. So,
I haven't gotten much into some of the things like
mhm,
the forms of the letters. I mean, aside from actually doing the identification and how they are consistent between the two. But I know that Terry Batcher is somebody we will have on in the future who also is kind of enamored by the way particular letters and forms are made, which could then assert a completely different letter or meaning. So we're going to
mhm,
hear from him later at some point. But I just kind of wanted to explain you guys seeing these different forms and what they mean to you, because I don't look that deeply into it. I'm only here for obviously the forensic side of the handwriting.
mhm.
And so your message basically yielded what in this particular
It
case?
it yields Tot Dagnan seen R. Nixon, and he often in code and in ciphers and even just a simple anagram left out the I in Nixon because either way it still says Nixon. So,
Right.
anyways, Lent Bonanno, USA United Auto Workers Goon because it's USA UAW Goon Siegel 20,000 in Vegas slot lot. Now, this is when Siegel had kind of took over Will Wilkerson's planned casino lot in the North Vegas area. So it's saying that Todd Dagnan witnessed then Richard Nixon, who was OPA, Office of Price Administration guy.
Nixon
Um,
was?
yeah, he was connected to it. Yeah.
So
And
then
then
we
after,
we have a direct connection between Nixon and OPA
definitely.
and Dagnan and OPA, because Dagnan's
Yeah.
father was Office Price of
Hmm.
Administration as well. Interesting. Okay.
Yeah. So that's why I believe it's saying It could also, the R could also be Representative Nixon, but I notice he often leaves R Nixon, meaning Richard Nixon. So, but it, even though it says Lent Bonanno, USA, United Auto Workers, Goon, Siegel, 20,000, it also could mean, because Will Wilkerson, the lesser known fact about him, was Catholic. And during Lent, you did anything like this, it was a crime against a Catholic. And so it could work two ways there, but I'm going to go with Lent, as in gave him money during when people were having to struggle, and even the United Auto Workers then, because of the war, that gave him the money for Siegel's to build the casino, and
So
at
what do
least
you mean
invest
by
in more.
what do you mean by goon? So goon Siegel
Oh,
for the United.
it means a thug, a
No,
violent
I
guy.
get
Yeah, no, but
I get the goon part, but
mhm.
you say United Auto Workers goons. So Siegel wasn't
Yeah, he was
somebody. He wasn't somebody in a top position with United Auto Workers. He was more or less the heavy hand
he
or
was
the.
he was the guy who was definitely going to beat up and kill people over this. That's
Gotcha. So
like
that's what you
yeah,
mean. So okay,
yeah,
so
because Siegel,
he was the heavy hand for the United Auto
yeah,
Workers, basically.
and
Okay.
Siegel was in place of Lucky Luciano, so he was acting for Lucky Luciano, which meant that was all over the world, even though it was
And wasn't
happening.
he was in prison at this point in time?
Lucky Luciano was, so Siegel was the guy in place for him, and
Gotcha.
the substitute. So he had a lot of power.
So basically, even though so they're indicating that the daughter is the one who
She
witnessed
witnessed,
this.
yeah, she would then, I think around 3 years old, could still remember a lot of what was happening, and Richard Nixon was being uh, how do I say, uplifted and supported by a lot of people that this unknown is going to have a lot of power and become president someday.
So
So
you think it was some years before her death
yeah, it
that
was a couple of years before her death. So
this was seen?
yeah, she's around 3 at the time, and it's a couple of years later, and Nixon's becoming more powerful. He's by 1946 getting a lot of notoriety for his activities in Washington. So she's got to go. That's the sad part.
So how does that play into one of the communications we're going to see that said I meant to get old man Dagnan and instead got his daughter?
I think that they were going to get Old Man Dagnan, but something from what I've seen, and that one I just that you're bringing up, is something went wrong with William Herons, and so they. It looks like he was working with a number of people. Jack was, and he's giving out the communications, but something went wrong, so they decided to throw Herons to the wolves. And it looks like
That
Herons
kind of
was
makes.
yeah. We don't want to get too far ahead, but I think
Well,
that's what
no.
happened.
That's fine because at first I just thought he was a victim of this entire thing as well. But we do know that he had a letter that was found on him while he was in jail awaiting sentencing and everything else, and he indicated it was some type of homework project that he was working on. But it does allude to other people in the group. It appears that it was written to Hirons, not that Hirons was writing it in first person, and it does indicate there are other people involved like George, and the letter says Jock, but I'm thinking it's Jack, and they've obviously,
Yeah.
with all
Well,
of the dissemination in this case, they've changed things that they want the public to view. So there is some consistency with what you're saying. I just didn't know that he would have been a willing
yeah.
participant. He was
I
basically
think
robbing houses at that time and going to
I
school.
think I think from what I'm piecing together is that because it always made me wonder, why did they use the new CIA's new
Ooh,
perfection
let's get to
of
that.
children? Yeah. Why did
Yeah,
they
let's
do
get
that?
to that one first. Let's see what we've got next in the presentation. Okay, so this was basically a recreation of the same thing. And you had indicated that the burn this for her safety was the actual key code to this particular message.
Something like that. Burn this, because that was also once I did the one of stop me before I kill more. I thought, well, if this isn't also going to work as an anagram, what if these are code keys? So that's what I'm coming out with.
And
And
this was on a flap on the back side of this particular
mhm,
ransom note. It wasn't on the same side or same page. So as if it was written on an opposite side, or a flap or a piece that wasn't
mhm.
on the forefront of the other message.
Oh,
Okay.
but you know what? You're reminding me. The reason why they did things like even what I'm doing on paper and pen and pencil was it was sending a message, and after you sent the message, you burned it. If it's sending.
Right.
So yeah, burn this for her safety. But I'm noticing, and I've seen it several times, that Jack in his world is spelling Susan. It's supposed to be Suzanne, but that tells me he's listening and hearing somebody else with kind of an accent that doesn't say Suzanne and calls her Susan. So it even comes out as Susan now, Susan now. And so then it says, got a GE girl, Susan next. But I think she was
So
probably at this point briefly alive, but
So what
was
is the
deadly.
connection? What is the connection between Giancana and all of this? Because I see that you had written in here that there was possibly a connection to the mob with one of these individuals. I've contended that some of these individuals were likely hits. Others were to make it appear as though it was random. And there is word that I was reading about Josephine Ross. She was trying to start up a restaurant. And
Mm-hmm.
some of these things that these women did back in these days was to borrow money from the mob, open their
Yeah.
business, and then give them a way to launder their money. And if they didn't uphold or pay back, then they found themselves in trouble, correct?
Yeah, pretty much. And I got to say it, the mobsters at the time, especially since they had ties outside of the United States, um, they had a lot of information. And if doing the favor was, I'll give you the money for your restaurant if you sell me some secrets on so and so that's high up, and if that fell through, yeah. And what I'm seeing Jack's world is they're doing mob tactics to also, in a way, say, hey, we know a lot about what you're involved with. We'll just do the same as what you would do. Because the mob then were, cutting people's legs off, beheading people. Um, and we can go into disgusting activities, how they did things. You can just think of the movie The Godfather, and it's pretty accurate what was happening then. So,
Well, and I do see that the message that was being sent using Susan Degnan was definitely a message that was wanted.
mhm,
The killer wanted to be known. Most of
mhm,
these people, most of these serial killers are not looking to describe where the body is found, assisting the police department in finding it. I mean, they're wanting to get away with this. They're not making communications with somebody so that they can be caught. Or I think that finding those body parts are indicative of what the mob was
it was,
doing to send that message to the individuals that they wanted to, which is imminent harm or grave harm is going to come to anybody who crosses them.
mhm.
So
And
I
it
think that's correct.
looks like whatever went exactly wrong with Herons, they just threw him to the wolves, and I think that's why, was I read it just recently again, just to get my mind back on track about the lipstick killer cases. They knew early on that they were going to send somebody to prison. So looks like Bill Herons was in on what was happening, and they were able to use circumstantial evidence. And I have a sneaking suspicion, since they use a CIA truth serum, that he was believed to be an agent who might have some information that he's trying to sell, which was worth a lot of money to our enemy agents.
Well, and we do know that it did a lot of things by putting somebody in prison. It not only gave more sensationalistic stories, it gave the media something to continue and follow and talk about, including the trial of Hirons. It also, it not only sold many, many newspapers just based on the murders themselves, but the continuation of finding somebody and following that trial also continued to sell lots of newspapers as well.
Yeah. That's where the Hearst, William Randolph Hearst comes in. He knew how to sensationalize stories, and people.
Is that where the term yellow journalism came up?
Yeah, it's it sold a lot of papers, and then it also helped shape people's minds. Like Richard Nixon was going to be a future president, so sensationalizing stories from Richard Nixon's district in California, which was a lot larger then. So definitely yellow journalism doing this. Wow.
Well, we do have a few more communications in this. I wonder, and I do have them on there. Let me just brief the next ones, and then I'll let you go into the solves. So, so for instance, Gould, which is actually the individual who is responsible for the Dick Tracy comics, introduced a malodorous, tobacco-spitting character, B.O. Plenty, with little significant complaint from the readers in the 1940s. However, the 1960s introduction of a crooked lawyer, Flyface, and his relatives surrounded by swarming flies created a negative reader reaction strong enough for papers to drop the strip in large numbers. This is just some backup information. Cat's Eye. I will get back on track here in a second. There was then a dramatic change in the strip setting, leaving behind the strip's origins as an urban crime drama for science fiction plot elements and regular visits to the moon. So we will be talking about these moon landing and other things and how those fit into the Zodiac. An increasingly fantastic procession of enemies and stories ensued. The Apollo 11 moon landing prompted Gould to abandon this phase. Finally, Dick Tracy was beset by the overall trend in newspaper comics away from strips with continuing storylines and toward those whose stories are largely resolved within one series of panels. And so this also leads into the Jack's fascination with the Apollo missions and the atomic bomb and all of these different types of things. In 1946, there was a writing that was found on a wood post. It was done in all block letter writing, which we will see more of this block letter writing as it comes about in the Black Dahlia cases, the D.B. Cooper cases, the Zodiac cases. And this one said, "Stop me before I kill more." So again, we have this more philosophy and this stop me that is going on. So all letters involved state that there will be more, which the writing on the wood post is similar to the desktop poem in that they are both on wood, and the suspect chose to write in a downward pattern using a different line for each word, which is almost reminiscent of that poetic style that we'll discuss with the Zodiac. The use of the capital B in the block writing is a style that Jack Tarrance, Sherry Jo Bates, D.B. Cooper, Black Dahlia, and Zodiac displays in their writing. The "Please Get Me" is equal to the Belle letter from the Zodiac, Black Dahlia, Susan Degnan letters, and more. We see the hyphenation usage again that we talked about in regards to the Zodiac, Scorpion, Jack, and many of these communications. And then the use of the circle I dot, which is, this is notated heavily in the Zodiac and the Jack Tarrance writings. So it did not shock or surprise me to see the circular I dot in the word kill. And the backwards 3E is also consistent with, or the epsilon E is consistent with Jack and the Riverside Phantom. So we also saw a paper bag that said, "Please get me." Again, I need to do some research on these, do some cross-referencing, but we do see the triple hump M that we saw in the writing on the wall in the "For Heaven's Sakes" message, and one of the few cursive samples of the killer's writing, because I think we don't see that again until the Atlanta, Georgia child killers. So that's in a nutshell what I have for that. And let's move into the cipher solve. So here is another one of your solves, Cat's Eye.
Yeah, I wish I could have got it even cleaner, but That was when I did that during these time periods. I let the listeners know I was still recovering, and I'm still recovering from the Clayton fire. But I had no electricity then, so I was doing these outside in the sunlight and cranking them out as best as I could. But let me explain how I came up for the X, because it is saying. Hold on a second. I might have to get my phone out to see this.
Well, I can tell you it says Siegel NNHAGRX short next.
Well, the reason why I stuck with believing the possibility that the NH would be New Hampshire and Attorney General, because Siegel, through Bonanno, through his connections, through Lucky Luciano, has something going on there. And, the Attorney General is probably either being harsh on them or, you know, so that was my guesstimate. But the RX is Elizabeth Short, if I remember correctly, was perceived to have a drug problem. It might be a drug mule for a brief time, anything to, make some money for a while. So, and let me just explain how I came up with the X, because I had to refresh my memory here. The one that you're saying is the epsilon E was different than the capital E shape. That's a common code cipher code key. So I thought, is he trying to say a different thing with just that smaller E twice? And what I came up with, because he uses a lot of Latin, I came up with E for exempli, which is often a part of a term that's an example. It's a Latin term, but it's also abbreviated as EX. So that's where I was able to come up with the X, that it might mean a Latin term that's for centuries abbreviated as EX.
When was Siegel assassinated?
I believe it was 1947, and
so close to the time frame. So this message is basically yielding that Siegel, the New Hampshire AG, the RX short is next. So what you're saying here is that he is indicating that these are the next three victims that are coming up.
Pretty much, because from what I think you're going to be doing it pretty much later, not that much later. So I think she was in on getting to know Siegel quite well through some drug activities, and then was only briefly connected. I would think less than a year, but she was going to tell that was information that was valuable. That's my opinion. So it's unvariable that she was going to tell who's going to kill Siegel. And
that might match why they cut her mouth wide open.
Yeah.
Taking of the tongue, cutting of the mouth.
Yeah,
these would be
you
mob
talk.
tactics.
That is
you
very
talked.
mob tactic. So,
right.
So that's so they're saying that those two are pretty, and it is in that order. Siegel, no, she gets killed just before Siegel is killed. But it's several months apart.
Right. And I do see that that they printed in the newspaper that the lipstick printed this sign on a post near the building where the body of Suzanne Degnan was dismembered. And it was discovered yesterday, it says. So basically, we're seeing now how the messages are no longer talking about Susan Degnan because she's already died and or she's been killed. And now he's leaving this next message in effort. So the message previous from Francis Brown indicated that Susan Degnan was next. And then we see this message after Susan Degnan has been murdered that the next people on the list is Siegel, the New Hampshire AG, which we didn't mention was at the time Harlan Fisk Stone.
No, the AG at the time was last name D'Amores. So Ernest D'Amores.
And did he die in 1946?
No, he didn't die, but I think he was pretty harsh on the mobsters, but maybe also I hate to say it, and my apologies to the AG, who's now long gone, but a lot of these attorney generals were on the take. If they wanted to keep their jobs, They had to
overall,
do favors.
Chicago
they had
was
to do favors.
yeah.
They had to
Overall,
do favors.
Chicago was known to be extremely corrupt during this time,
Yeah,
and
so
I'm sure
and
there were a
Chicago was
few.
pretty much ruling everything all over the United States, out of Chicago into California, coast to coast.
And there is a connection, actually, or there's been shown a connection between Elizabeth Short and the Chicago area, traveling back to watch the Hirons trial, which may explain why she was interested in it. Because if she was part of some group that he was part of, then of course she would want to follow that and stay close to what's going on.
She wanted to know, I hate to say it, was she on the list? To get a good guess.
Possibly.
Yeah.
And a lot of the information actually that I'm finding about some of these victims, including into the Zodiac era, has some connection to Chicago, whether it be money laundering or printing fake money or having boyfriends from Chicago. There's a lot of that running around. So basically, I think we put up here the Attorney General at the time. Let's see, the scandals had been besmirched. So that's in 24. I'm trying to see if I can catch us up. Go figure. I suspect that our connection is right here between Stone and Hoover.
Stone was born in New Hampshire, so he had a connection to the Attorney General there.
Gotcha.
So you're actually not. You're in what I call the outskirts of the bullseye here.
Right. I'm just trying to lead everybody up to it to see where it goes. But it looks like the information that I had was that in 1924, he was appointed United States Attorney General by Amherst classmate President Calvin Coolidge, who felt Stone would be perceived by the public as beyond reproach to oversee investigations into various scandals arising under the Harding administration. These scandals had besmirched Harding's Attorney General, Harry M. Daugherty, and forced his resignation. In one of the first acts as Attorney General, Stone fired Daugherty's cronies in the Department of Justice and replaced them with men of integrity, which is interesting because I've now seen that twice, that Lucky Luciano housed his establishments with men of integrity. And now we have somebody saying this again. As Attorney General, he was responsible for the appointment of J. Edgar Hoover as head of the Department of Justice's Bureau of Investigation, which later became the Federal Bureau of Investigation, and directed him to remodel the agency so it would resemble Britain's Scotland Yard and become far more efficient than any other police organization in the country. And I'm going to note that as we hit the Black Dahlia series, that's when we start seeing that the killer is actually pointing his stuff in the direction of J. Edgar Hoover. So go figure, I suspect our connection is right here between Stone and Hoover and the institutionalization of the FBI. Hoover and the FBI become new taunts for Black Dahlia killer and more. The message ciphered from the Wood Post indicates that Stone was next in or around January 1946. But you're saying now you believe that it is a different AG at the time that is the hit. So that might be something we have to clear up as to who it was. But
he survived though.
It said he was suddenly stricken.
No,
actually,
Stone.
Stone was suddenly stricken while in an open session of the Supreme Court. He had just, or by some accounts, not quite finished reading aloud his dissent in the I'm not going to try and say that. It's a case versus the United States. Justice Hugo Black called the court into a brief recess and physicians were called, but Stone died of a cerebral hemorrhage on April 22nd, 1946. So while you came up with that, I did a little bit of research and found that particular gentleman did actually pass in 1946. So
what caused the cerebral hemorrhage?
Right.
You're going to see that the mention of Dr. Hodel. Sorry.
I think we're going to come up to that here next.
So I mean, he would know how to cause things. Sorry, but I know Steve Hodel, if he's listening, he's going to be like, yeah. My Hodel was somewhere in this mess too.
Right. And in these particular newspaper articles that I have flashing up here, I found additional messages, which are not letters or communications that I've been able to put my hands on, only parts of the information that was relayed by the newspaper. And some of those are this next cipher that we talked about. And it indicates in the newspaper that it says, Mayor Edward Kelly received a note. This is to tell you how sorry I am not to get old Dagnan instead of his girl. Roosevelt and the OPA make their own laws. Why shouldn't I and more? So the why shouldn't I and more comes back to the same more philosophy that we've been talking about. I and more is Zodiac. We've got about 5 minutes here, Cat's Eye. Zodiac and I and the police, Jack. Hold on. I and the police, Jack, and I and the other sergeants. So we're seeing this I and more, which the linguistic professor from UC Davis had caught on to between Jack and the Zodiac. It's a statement that he uses, and it's a statement that he showed that less than 2% of the population uses, because we are taught to properly speak about someone else before ourselves. So we would typically say something like the other sergeants and I, while Jack always places himself first. We find the Zodiac, and now the lipstick killer is doing that same thing. So why don't you tell us what you decoded with that message?
Well, this bugged me after we were discussing the possibility of doing your show. Why did I not try to, look into that note? And I said, well, it's because I haven't seen a picture of the note. But I've done hundreds of these since then, since I started doing these, cracking them open, these codes.
Cat's Eye, we've only got like 4 minutes left, so I need you to.
So I will just say that it amazed me that it came out as President Truman, Lita self, see myself on ladder at North Edgewater window fitting, dive in entrance, kill youth inside of door, Hilliard photo shoot, which means lots of photos of Dr. G. Hodel with Monray, dissection into torso, arms, legs. So, ? CIA sent phony William Herons, i.e., which means it is, or therefore, he used to cry alone a lot in prison, signed Jack. So, yeah.
So you think that there is some definite connection between Dr. Hodel, which is kind of fitting in with Steve Hodel, his son, who believes that he believes actually that Dr. Hodel is the actual killer. I don't necessarily see that Jack would need somebody to do the bisection. I think that's something he was clearly capable of doing, but I'm not negating anything that you've solved here. I just don't, I don't know anything about cipher solves to be able to say whether or not it's correct, but it does lead back into some things that we know that Steve Hodel has been trying to prove himself, and that's some type of affiliation between his father and the Black Dahlia and the lipstick killing cases. So it's interesting that you've come up with that.
Yeah, it's alluding to like what you said, that even with Herons, they found something that says he was in with a group of people, but he was being thrown to the wolves, and he was going to go to prison and never get out. So
and then you said Letha. I think, did you spell? Let me see how you did spell Letha with an A in it, and her name is spelled Letha. So I'm not sure if that A can be used in another place, but I did notice on the marriage certificate, it does not include an A, but I did see that Stephen Dewhurst did print her name in his book with an A, and I thought that's spelled incorrectly. I went back to the marriage certificate, and on the marriage certificate is just an E, no A. Now, that brings into another part, because I wondered often how Jack could be involved with these things and marrying Letha so early on in March of 1946. But if she is with him, that might conclude the fact that Letha and Jack met previous to the Dagnan murder. And if she happened to be with him when he did the kidnapping and murder, and she was aware of this, might also explain why she fell off the face of the earth and nobody can find her.
Well,
we've got 1 minute here. Is there anything
Well, I'll just be really quick. When I was doing this one, which is recent, the second phase that I had was saying my girl, Lita self, saw this. So then when I realized I was missing the word prison, and I said, it's in sick in parentheses, then it came out Lita self, see
Well, the
myself.
sick in parentheses was likely printed by the newspaper because
No,
they believe
no.
that they believe
No.
that the word "ol" was spelled incorrectly, because instead of it being OLD, he used the Southern reference OLE, and so they printed the word
this
sick in the
implies the
newspaper.
newspaper connection, because these messages, even then, were being conveyed through the newspaper. And I
that
believe
was
that's William Randolph Hearst's newspaper.
I
So,
believe that as well. I do believe these
mhm.
messages were going through the newspaper. We're probably going to have to call that an end. Tell everybody to
Okay.
have a great week. Thank you, Harriette. We will have you back as soon as we can.
Thank you.
Oh,